thank you for being my second guest on this Oldtime Central project.
That's a pleasure. Especially following the first guest.
That's right. I mean, I guess my first question is just how did you get into playing old time?
Well, I was influenced by the folk revival. So when I was even in grammar school, my best friend's older brother had a Kingston trio-like group, and they had a banjo in that group. And I was attracted to it, and then all the singer-songwriters, Dylan and all that stuff. So I started playing the guitar, and then in high school we had a jug band based on the Jim Kweskin jug band, who were big in New York. I got a banjo 4-string, and I tuned it like a guitar, like the top 4 strings of a guitar, and played it that way. And just started getting really attracted to the banjo, and the kind of notion that the banjo was, America's instrument. And, we have a lot more history than that now, but at the time, there was something there that I was kind of searching for, being a suburban New Jersey kid. So by the time I got to college in 1970, I met a guy who came out of the Chapel Hill conglomerate, and he taught me how to frail, and I've been frailing ever since. And in those days, you could go anywhere, and there was this, I think I was telling you this last night, there was a kind of core repertoire that came out of those Chapel Hill recordings by Hollow Rock and by Fuzzy Mountain. And so I would, upstate New York, I started playing up there, and the Highwoods were up there, and then I moved to Vermont, and there was a scene there, and then I moved to Texas, and there was a scene there, and I just kept finding these people everywhere, and so I just kept going with it, and started playing with a guy in Austin, Ralph White, in 1978, and he was just up here this past weekend playing with me, and we've been playing together for 40 years.
Yes.
And it's kind of amazing. And he and I got into this thing when I moved to Austin, where we started playing these old time tunes, but kind of almost in a trance way. I mean, we'd do a lot of improvising on the tune, and we'd just sit on the same tune for a really, really long time. Probably incredibly boring for if anybody was listening, but we were just by ourselves and we were just playing.
Right.
And it was just so that's how I kind of got into it.
So originally it was just through recordings and wanting to...
Well, it was recordings plus... No, originally it was this guy, Jim Hibbard, who taught me how to frail, and he and I played together when I was in college, and he had a lot more knowledge of the old-time thing. I was coming more out of the folky thing. And he and I started playing, and I remember him saying, don't strum, don't do all that strumming, just play it kind of straighter. And then when I got to Vermont, I met another old-time fiddler, and I played with him. And by that time, I was frailing banjo, so we had a banjo fiddle thing. And I just kept meeting people. So it was really through people more than recordings, but recordings also.
Right.
I learned that Chapel Hill repertoire not through the recordings per se, but through Jim, actually initially. And some of the tunes that I learned then, we still play. So I play with my son Matt now also, and he always says one of the first tunes I ever taught him was Cold and Frosty Morning, and we still play that. And for some reason that's a tune I've never gotten tired of.
Right. There are tunes like that.
Yeah, and we can play it no matter how many times you play it, and the more you play it. So, I guess the other thing to put into this was, I was a professional ethnomusicologist, and I studied Indian music in South Indian Vina, and then, my later work was in Peru, and then I worked in Zimbabwe, and all those aspects, particularly the Vina initially, came into my banjo playing. So when you play South Indian music, classical music, you learn how to improvise. Right. And it's a particular way of thinking about it, where you have a raga and you have these slots in the raga. It's not a mode. That's kind of too easy, but you learn how to do substitutions for this slot and this slot and this slot. And as you play a tune longer, so this is the Frosty Morning example. I could play it for you and show you. as you play a tune longer and longer, you have more and more variations to fit in slot A,
Sure.
B, C, and D, and so that ultimately you end up really having a lot of things to do on it. So that's why we never get tired of it.
Right.
Matt, it's interesting with Matt, sometimes by the time he learned a tune from me, I was playing so many variations that he didn't really even know what the initial tune was.
Right.
Which can be a disadvantage when you go
But that's not a very common way of playing old time, and there aren't a lot of people who think about it that improvisationally or that. Yeah, and a lot of people seem to have a tune, and they play that tune, and there are little bits here and there that they'll change up, but they don't go too far from whatever base that they secure for themselves.
Right. Well, when Matt and I play together, I mean, he improvised, so he learned all that improvising stuff from me, and we both. So I think of a tune as a model to play with,
Right.
and off of,
Yeah.
and not as. I mean, so that's that's kind of a more, that's both Indian music, but it's also kind of an African take on what a piece is.
Right.
It's a series of resources that then you rejuggle every time you play,
Right.
however you feel like doing it at that moment.
That's nice.
And so that is how we do it. And there are other people I used to live in Urbana for a long time, and so Urbana, Illinois, and a bunch of folks there in our group there. So Matt was in it, and me, and a guy named Randy Cordell, who's also a composer of tunes and also approached it this way. And so there's a whole bunch of us that did it that way. And for us, I guess playing, it was just about playing. And
Right.
playing in the real sense of play.
Yeah.
And using tunes as a model to do that. And that way tunes stay fresh, and,
Sure.
and they're always fun. And it doesn't always work in standard old time jams. So sometimes I think I annoy people by doing it too much. I mean, did you notice it? I was doing it last night. I mean, I don't really, once the tune is going, I don't necessarily play the tune, but play around the tune.
Yeah, well, the thing is that my experience is mostly with people who do that anyway.
Okay.
And that's what I enjoy as well. Also because I have a lot of sort of jazz in my background, and I like the play. There's some tunes that I can think of as set compositions, and it's occasionally fun to trot them out just because they're cool the way they are.
Mm-hmm.
But the most fun comes from being in conversation, I think, both in conversation with this model, like you were saying, like you come back to it again and try and reinterpret it and see what new it can give you, but then also in conversation with the other musicians.
Yeah.
And both of those things are happening at the same time. That's what's really fun for me. So
I think studying and playing African music for a long time also really shaped what I do, because, in Africa you never clap in unison. You always clap in the spaces of other people's clapping patterns. And so that whole notion of interlocking. So I love to play with. So when Matt and I played, what I was starting to say is that one of us will kind of hold down the melody, and the other can play around, and then we'll swap, or we'll interact with each other in an interlocking fashion, where he is doing the downbeat and I'm accenting the offbeat, so that it's this interlock thing that we like to do. And so it's just it's fun. And in situations where I get a real strong sense that the people I'm playing with don't like me to do that, I try not to do it. I mean, I try to play straighter. We also, playing with your own kid is interesting. And then this group, so we played in Urbana, we were playing together for like 30 years or 20 years or whatever. And we got into this, we had our own sort of mini cohort style that worked, and all of us were also we were into old time, but we were also into Cajun and have been. So Matt grew up with old time and Cajun, and Randy was really into Cajun. We had a Cajun band as well as playing. I guess we call it old time, but a lot of times it gets defined out of that. But
it's a flexible term, apparently.
It's a flexible term. But in that group, we just were very comfortable doing that, and we just got spoiled. And then so that when I get out of that circle and go elsewhere and find that people would rather. So what I was going to say about Cajun stuff was our rhythmic feel is slightly different.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we shuffle in a kind of Cajun way. So when I play the fiddle, people always go, "Oh, that's Cajun."
Right.
But interestingly, here you go. When we go down to Louisiana now and go to jams down there, and they go, "Oh, you sound like bluegrass," which
right.
I don't sound like bluegrass at all.
Right.
But I sound foreign to them.
Right, sure.
And up here they think I sound Cajun, and down there
right.
they think I sound Kentuckian.
So you've succeeded in not fitting anywhere.
Anywhere, yeah.
Well, and it's interesting because you have experience playing so many different kinds of music. Why has old time remained attractive? I mean, what you think of as your old time?
Yeah, and I do think of it that way. I hate to be kicked out of the genre.
Yeah.
Well, a couple of things. One, I love the banjo. I mean, I just love that instrument. And I love the guitar too. I mean, I love all these instruments.
Sure.
But the banjo is the instrument I compose the most on. It's the instrument I feel the freest on. Clawhammer banjo, I play out of chords like you do when you play fingerstyle guitar. So I think on the banjo that way too. I'm playing out of melody stuff out of chords a lot of times. So I've got the chords and I've got the harmony. It's a really great rhythmic instrument. I mean, it really is self-sufficient, unlike three finger where you really want a bass and a guitar behind you.
Right.
It's self-sufficient.
Right.
Rhythmically, harmonically, and then melodically.
And when you say playing out of chords, you mean you can find a chord shape like in fingerstyle guitar.
Yeah.
And as long as you know different chord shapes and different inversions, then you can find fun things to do with them.
Well, and also you're playing melody in the chord.
Right.
You're frailing, but you've also got the chord going.
Sure.
So that you use that a lot too. So I just think I love the instrument. I've always loved it. I mean, I love the sound of it. And for some reason, I mean, I compose on other instruments too, but for some reason, I compose easiest on that instrument, and I don't know why. So that's point one musically, and point two. I'll just give an example. So 4 years ago, I moved to Lexington, Kentucky, after living in Urbana, Illinois for 30 years or 29 years or whatever it was, and so I come down here, and I don't really know anybody except my girlfriend. The reason I came, and so we started going to these jams, and pretty quickly I knew a lot of people, and pretty quickly I started to form friendships, and that was amazing. I mean, it was really quick.
Right.
And just started going to music things, and so the social aspect, and we still go. We go to a jam pretty much every Monday night.
In Lexington.
In Lexington. So we've just moved out of town now. Again. And we've moved an hour to eastern Kentucky, Powell County, and but we'll still go in for the Monday night thing,
right?
Just because that's our group, and we know everybody, and it's a way to be social. And out here, there's not that much. We haven't, but there are people out here too, and I plan to meet them soon, because there's all these people that play. This is really, we're in Clay City right now, and this is kind of a center for bluegrass.
Right, I was going to say it's more of bluegrass.
Yeah, but it's bluegrass in a way that it's kind of old bluegrass.
Right, it's not the commercial.
Right, and so it's the music that people just have played in their families for a long time, and so it's kind of organic here, and
fits in with the old time stuff a lot better. Actually,
it does. I mean, it is old time.
Right,
I mean, it's just
exactly.
it's old music, and especially when they start hitting those hymns. But the folks, so we go camping in eastern Kentucky, and when you're in a campground, you've got families there that are just like from 10 miles down the road, and they've come to that campground 10 miles away as their vacation for the year.
Right.
But the whole family comes from everywhere, and they all set up tents together, and they play music, and they often will include us. Shannon plays guitar and me. And they particularly like me to play the fiddle because there's typically not a fiddler there.
Okay.
There'll be banjo players, and there'll be mandolin players, and guitar and dobro and stuff. And at least that's been my experience.
Right.
And I'm a pretty new fiddler, and I'm not that versatile on it. So it's always been kind of tricky, but they're very open and they want me to do it. They want the sound, so so I do it. But anyway, it's been interesting, and it'll, I think, continue to be interesting.
Yeah.
And what I also love about this particular scene is the people who are coming out of playing this music, whatever we want to call it, in their families for generations. You know, so their grandfather was a fiddler and their father was a fiddler, and is they have a kind of different attitude than the different scenes I've been in the North, where they're just kind of easier about it. You know, whatever you want to do is fine with them, and they're kind of open to whatever repertoire you want to play, and it's just it's social music, and they're doing it for that reason.
Right. And so the strictness isn't there among some of the people who learned it later in life. Right?
Yeah. There's no kind of definitional boundaries, and they're not kind of uptight about, the way. Now, having said that, I will say this, that when you go to a gathering, we went to this really cool gathering that happens every year on a goat farm out in the country, and all these folks have been playing together. They're community musicians, and they've been playing together forever. And they know the same repertoire. They've been playing together, and it's probably family stuff too. And they were not, they didn't do this improvisational thing very much. They stuck to the tune. There were variations and stuff, but they stuck to the tune pretty much. And I got the real sense by talking to people that for them, and here's where I think like sticking to the tune and sticking to tradition made sense to me. They were playing the tune in a certain way because for them, that's what whoever, their grandfather or their father or their neighbor or whatever, how they played it, and it's like this pointing to that person and this connection to this person. So I had this.
It's like Grandma's brownie recipe.
Yeah.
You could change it, but why?
Yeah.
Because doing it is part of remembering Grandma.
Yeah. So for them, it was this connection to actual people and actual ancestors.
Right.
And it really reminded me of like the whole music in Zimbabwe thing, where you play a tune in a spirit possession ceremony to bring the spirit, the ancestor, your grandfather, actual grandfather, literally, into the ceremony, into the spirit medium. And if you didn't play the tune the way your grandfather liked it, he's not going to come.
Right.
And it really reminded me of that, of these tunes in a certain way as a direct connection to people and to a past and to a community. So in that context, all of a sudden, all this traditionalism and kind of strictness about playing tunes in a particular way made total sense to me.
Right. If you're sitting in a bar in Chicago and somebody's like, no, you have to play it exactly the way Grandpa wrote it, you're like, why?
Well, I didn't have a grandpa.
Well,
but I didn't have a grandpa who did it.
Right, exactly.
So for me to do that, I don't have those indexical connections. I don't have that pointing back to particular people. So for us, and I say us, I'm thinking of Matt and me and my friends that I played with. We play the way we play because that's coming out of our experience. So that if I use Vina thinking about improvisation or African thinking about interlocking, those are really a deep part of my own experience now. It's not just something Paul Simon-esque where I whipped into the country, recorded it, whipped out. I've spent a lot of time doing it, and so it's just part of my habits now.
Right.
And so and again back to the banjo. Why is the banjo still probably my favorite? And for some reason that instrument allows me to do all that stuff.
Right.
I can improvise, and some people actually have said to me, "How do you make your banjo sound like a sitar?"
Right.
And I go, it's funny, but if I didn't include those things and I tried to imitate recordings of Doc Boggs or something, that would be, that's just not me.
Right.
I didn't come from that place, and I didn't come from that time, and that's not my experience.
Right.
So we tie it back to, me individually, I tie it back to my own experience, but I also tie it to this community we formed in Urbana, where we played in a certain way, and we brought those kinds of Cajun influences rhythmically and these other things I've talked about. Well, you asked why old time all this time. And it's true, given all the instruments I've played, I always come back to the banjo, even if I've left it for a little while. And I don't know why, but it just seems like I've been playing it started when I was about 20, so
A few years.
it's 46 years now. It's just kind of part of me.
Right.
But I'm able to use it. It's an instrument that you can use, and that I can do all these other things in and with. So it just, I don't know. It just seems like flexible. And at this point, it's just me. It's
Right.
just part of me.
Right.
And it's the same thing with composing. I really like to compose tunes on the banjo. And I was telling you earlier that at one point I got kind of bored with just playing kind of standard old time tunes, and I was thinking about just giving up. And Matt said, "Well, why don't you just start composing? Why don't you make up your own tunes that keep you interested?"
Right.
And I did, and it did.
Right.
So, yeah.
Cool. So you.
Which was a composition that came out of this opening riff that was something I did just as a way of warming up, and it turned into this song. So I do a lot of these double. Chord G, and then so you're moving from a G chord to a C chord there. Then the B part switches to, so that's A major chord, and the B part is A minor. And so I do these kind of triplety hammer-ons. And then another one here. And then same cadence. Is that clear enough?
So all together one time through?
Sure.